Welcome, accomplices. I'm Lynda Norman. I'm a watercolor artist here in the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia. I'm glad you're joining me in my studio today. We're going to talk about how spatter can bring a painting to life. I'm going to use a bit of gouache, which is an opaque watercolor, to show how that can show up on a piece of paper with watercolor on it and sort of enhance the design. Today I'm going to be using, oh, there it is. It's a fluid stuck together with the tape. Fluid watercolor paper, cold press finish. Now this is a lot smoother than what I normally use, but it is acid free and 100% cotton, and it is on a block. So I thought that would be a fun thing to work with today. We're going to do a quick landscape. One of my favorites to do is just sort of a flower garden scene, and then put some spatter on it to show how that can enhance the definition of some flowers and some things in the foreground. So we'll start off with wetting my palette as usual. Keep things nice and ready to go. I'm going to use my regular palette of colors, which are Mayan dark blue. I've got some indanthrone blue, undersea green, some sepia, Aussie red gold, quinacridone gold, and some neutral tint, some moon glow, some quin purple, and some quin gold. That's quinacridone purple, quinacridone rose, and quinacridone deep gold, and some transparent iron oxide. I probably won't use all of these colors. My go-to colors are limited to about 3 or 4. I just like the way it keeps things cleaner looking. So we'll start with just wetting the page. This page paper is, I said, smoother than what I normally work on. It feels different under my brush. You'll notice that if you try different papers. Much smoother. It's going to take the pigment differently. It's going to react differently. Things are going to flow much differently because there's not that irregular surface that's going to grab and move pigments in the direction of the texture of the paper. So we'll just start with a real quick, nice, light application to the sky with the Mayan dark blue. We can add just a tiny bit of quinacridone gold for a bit of sunlight coming through. And that's a fairly strong color, so what I'm doing is just wetting my brush, pulling the water off the brush for the most part, and just pulling off some of that color off the page. I always like to add a few little clouds in my sky. This is going to be, often my clouds and my skies are my focal point of the paintings, but today we are going to leave the flower garden as the focal point. So I'm going to dab out a lot of that color and let the rest kind of diffuse into soft, kind of cloudy areas. I'm going to continue with my larger brush. This is a solo brush from Watercolor Online, Michael Solovyev's watercolor store. And it's a five element brush. There's a smaller one which has 3. They're lovely to work with. They hold tons and tons of water. And for this purpose, for this painting, I like that they come to a very chiseled point, so I can do some lines with them if I prefer to. So the page is still damp, as you can probably see, a bit of sheen to it. I like to start my background of my landscapes, of the shrubbery and the rocks and the land and everything, with the Mayan dark blue, which is again what we used in the sky, but I just like to give it, it helps to add some of the shadows that I want in the background of my painting. And I can use that chiseled point just to make maybe some tree shapes in the background. When this Mayan dark blue does dry, it's going to be almost shadowy, almost like a mist is in front of it. So it's a nice color for the background. Gives that little bit of diffusion. And then we'll make, I think this will be perhaps a little pathway that comes around through the garden. So we'll just get some blue down there, Mayan dark blue. You can see where the pigment is diffusing into the water that's on the page, and it's giving that nice soft edge. And because it's a garden, we'll see there'll be lots of little things popping up in the background, so we'll just enhance some of those shapes. We'll add color to them later, add some petals and some different things, so we'll just make sure that those are in place. And this probably will come out just a tiny bit, and there'll be a bit of shrubbery on that one. Okay. There's our lovely blue. You can already see it's drying much lighter. Watercolor tends to do that. There's a few places where there's a bit of dark, and that's going to be beautiful for some shadows. We could even add probably just a few more shadows. Just random shapes. I often look at things and I think, you know, nature is very random as much as it's also perfect. And I often think, how could I ever recreate that shape or that form? And it's just shapes, making shapes. Okay, so I think we've got enough darkness in there. My next color will be undersea green. And I'm just going to put some water on my palette. This is the Bamboo Eco palette from Watercolor Online as well. The link will be in the description for you if you would like to go and research that on your own. They're beautiful. I love that the wells are large enough that I can fit my bigger brushes in and get a good coverage with my paints. And the spray bottle that I'm using is just a facial mister. You can find these at any craft store, your local art store, online, and they're just listed as a facial mister. And what they do is just allow a nice full mist spray. Great for wetting your palette or for wetting the background in larger pieces. So I'm going in with my undersea green. Again, just a couple of dabs. Because I keep my palette and my pigments wet, it just takes a couple of dabs to load my brush with some really great pigment. And I'm just going to dab a little bit of the green in again. This is for our background color. And we can bring that up a tiny bit into the other pieces that we've raised. And we'll bring a little more of the green down below. Again, we're just working on shapes. We don't need anything specific at the moment. I'm going to dab with my paper towel. This is the wet paper towel that I've been using all along for so far with this piece. It's got color on it. I don't mind that because when I'm dabbing off, it's going to maybe leave a little bit here and there. And because it's the same colors, the blue and the green, it's going to make some interesting shapes. Now, where I'm kind of rounded it, so that's going to give me some nice bushy shapes for our garden. And you can see here where that's kind of happened. So we've got some shapes of some bushes and some trees happening. Okay. Nice little rounded ones. And then as As always, I'm going to go in with just a little bit of, oops, that was the Aussie Red Gold. We're not ready for that yet. That's a bit of a strong color. I'm just going to go in with a tiny bit of the quinacridone gold, which is what we used in the background and pulled it away so it's very soft and diffused. But I just want to add just a tiny bit of that into my garden, just for some interest. And we're going to dab a bit of that out as well in a few moments. But I'm just going to maybe follow some of those shapes that have already sort of shown up. Okay. And again with my wet paper towel, and I'm just going to continue on trying to enhance some of those shapes. Okay. Now some of you have asked about cauliflowers and blooms, and you can see some of that is happening here. And I don't mind some of that. It gives me a bit of definition that I can work with later when I'm forming bushes and trees. But in this case, I can work with those. I can pull them out. It can enhance the edge of my pathway. And I can just pull them out. And allow for some shadows and some shading on the edge of that path. Again, a light touch, semi-dried up brush, and fairly chiseled on the edge, just so that I get that nice line. And I'm just pulling out the colors that are already damp and included in my design on the side. Now you've seen before how we use the plastic tab off of a bread bag or a bag of produce or fruit. And we can use that to just create some interesting bit of rock shapes on the bottom of our design and into our pathway a little bit. And they are really a fun thing to do. A little pile of rocks coming to the edge of the pathway. And we'll just soften some edges. All right. So the page is still fairly damp. There's a lot of moisture in some areas. Once it's a little drier, you can see the areas that are drier, the background trees that I placed there. I'm going to go in with my Lebensen brush. This is a goat synthetic blend. The bristles are 1.5 inch long, and it's placed into a bamboo cane handle. My favorite brush for pretty much every time I sit down to paint, it comes into play. I'm just going to go in with the same color that I used in this background, and I'm going to add some tree branches just for a little bit of definition in the background. And that will give us a nice bit of background here. This brush is so lovely. It is a precision point. I've had this brush for years, and it has not ever let me down. The point has been perfect, and it holds a ton of water. So we'll just give some of these trees in the background, just like I say, a little bit of definition, and then we're going to go in with our spatter once things have dried. I don't want to spatter too soon while things are still wet, because the idea of spatter is to have these little teeny weeny droplets, minute droplets of pigment that will stand out against the background. And they will feel almost a little raised because they're going to sit on top. They won't sit on top if your painting is wet. They will diffuse and settle in. So we'll take advantage of some drying time just to create a couple of these little branches and things that we need to bring into the background. And just dry that off a tiny bit. And we're just going to make a few trees. A few trees, and then the rest will be our flower garden. I love using this brush on the side as well because it can give me some really nice texture effect and some blending effects. Okay, so we've got a bit of trees, taller bushes in the background. To define these more floral areas, I'm going to just add, I think, just a little bit of some quinacridone rose. It's a lovely brighter color, and it will give me some of these beautiful red tones in our flower garden. And so maybe some of these bushes and flowers will be on the redder side. And again, just shapes. Put some shapes in, and the color will just indicate where something new is happening. My paper towel is always in my hand, ready to take out bits of color that don't belong. Smooth things over. So we're just getting some background bits in here. Now I tried to use that Aussie red gold earlier when I didn't really want to, so I'm going to try to put that in now because it's a luscious, gorgeous bit of orange color, and similar to the way I'm putting in the pink, I am just going to give it some placement in just some random spots, taking out a tiny bit. Oops, and then we'll So I love that the Aussie red gold just really picks up the play with the blues and the pinks, the quinacridone rose, and so you can already see what looks like we've got some banks of flower beds kind of cascading down these little hills here. Always be careful when you're using your paper towels to make sure that you don't touch an area with a random bit of color on your towel that you don't expect or don't really want to see. Okay. While I'm letting that dry, I'm going to go in and just work a tiny bit on this pathway. And I think the pathway probably should be more of a neutral color. I don't think I want to add a bright green at all for this. So I'm going to go in with a damp brush, and this is actually an acrylic brush, but I like that it has a fairly sharp edge on it, and it's large enough that I can blend some colors across. So we do have the undersea green. I think what I'm going to do, I don't know if you can see my palette or not, but I'm going to just touch the undersea green into the side of the palette. And so I'm not actually touching right into the deep color. Okay, I've got it mixed with a bit there. And I'm just going to very lightly bring that across my page, across my pathway, not across the whole page. Just as light feather touch as I can. As always, your horizon line where your pathway ends should be fairly straight with your painting. And I've left quite a bit of white space there. And I did that on purpose because I'm going to go and just touch my palette where I had sort of dabbed my brush off with that quinacridone gold. And then I'm just going to bring that across. Again, just between some of that green and white. And then I'm going to rinse my brush nice and clean. And then with a damp brush, just sort of blend those colors together a little bit. Bringing some of that side color in. It's pretty much dried now on the two embankments on the sides. And that's great. But I can still, because my brush is slightly damp, I can still pull that, some of that pigment across. And we just feather that through. And the colors that you have on the base of your little embankments can be re-wetted slightly and just pulled back into that pathway to give you a bit of indication of some shadow. And as the colors blend, they give you that beautiful earthy mixture of the blues and the greens and the golds together. And just lighten a few spots, and I think our path is done. Looks like our painting, for all intents and purposes, is dry enough to start adding some spatter. So we'll clean our brush and set that aside. You can spatter with watercolor. That's great. And in fact, I might even try a bit of that with, well, I could even try the same brush, as long as it's got some snap to it. So that means when you pull it back, your bristles are going to spring forward. So I want to show you what will happen if you use a fairly thick mixture. We'll do the quinacridone rose because that's in there. Take your finger, just loaded the tip of the brush. I don't want to load the whole thing. I don't want droplets of pigment and water falling onto my page. I just want the very finest spray of pigment droplets. And this brush is not going to work for that, with that amount of pigment and water. Very fine. It's not showing up with much of anything. So what I normally would do is, if it's a larger area, I will use one of these. I think this is a stencil brush, and I can dab it into the pigment, to the paints. Because it's a larger brush and there's going to be less control, what I normally would do is take a piece of paper towel or a piece of other scrap paper that I have on hand, And I just want to lay it sort of over top of the rest of my painting because I don't really want the spatter to go into my sky. Okay. And if I didn't want it to go on the pathway, then I would just it's easier to be a little more specific if you have a harder piece of paper. And so we'll make this fit on there. There we go. Doesn't have to be too specific. We can always add more later if we want to. So, paint on the tip. And you can see where it is going. If I did it on the white paper, you can see it's very, very fine still. So it just adds to the background. The wetter the paint, the more droplets you will get. And you can see on this white page how very fine those droplets are, but they will add to that background color. And you can add as much as you want. If we're going to use gouache, as I said, it's an opaque watercolor. Daniel Smith, which is my favorite brand of paints, has a line of gouache as well. There's many brands out there. It's some people paint only in gouache, which is kind of fun. I'm just going to grab another paper towel here. Oh, I see it's gone on the floor. That's okay. Colors come in such a range. So because I've got some nice bright yellow gold, I'm going to use Hansa Yellow Deep, another one of my favorite yellows to use. White, there's several whites. There really isn't a white in watercolor, so that's why we tend to leave our paint away from some areas on the page, leave white on the page rather than try to add a white paint. If you were, being true to some of the watercolor guidelines, a true watercolor does not have gouache. It does not have a signature in a archival pit pen or anything like that. It's just pure watercolor. So this would take this away from being a true watercolor, but for all intents and purposes, it's going to enhance your design. So I've got white and I've got a gold. This is cerulean blue. This cerulean blue is a color that a lot of people use in their skies. It's a bright, light, pretty blue. And we've got King's Royal Blue, which is very similar to the cerulean, but lighter. Almost a bit of a lilac-y mauve color in there. And then Wisteria, which I like. It's the lighter the color of gouache, the more effective your spatter is going to be. And I put the quinacridone rose on just to show you how that might work for a very fine background spatter. I like to start when I'm spattering with a lighter color. So a toothbrush really works well. Dip it into the gouache. And, oh my goodness, I put too much water. Too much water, and that's what happens. Okay, now we're going. And you can see now where the white is popping up in places. I don't mind it being thicker in some places. It'll look like a little stand of daisies. So I like the white on first. I'll often put white on again in the background over top of other colors just to smooth things out a tiny bit. So the yellow would be my next choice. I'm just going to do the same thing with my gouache little palette here. I don't know if you can see that or not. Just by wetting it just slightly to give me a bit of flexibility. So this is the Hansa Yellow Medium. And maybe I only want yellow on one side because there's only yellow flowers in that one area. So we'll do yellow up this side and in the center part maybe. Okay. And I really love this King's Royal Blue, so I think I'm going to use that. It's it's pretty intense, and yellows are in watercolor, in any kind of paint, yellows are more staining often, I find. Okay. And just a tiny bit of water, and I want to put a bit more of that King's Blue and Royal Blue in there. And I want to load my brush. You can see how very fine it is when you're spattering. A little more water. And it's going to give you that beautiful background. Now, if you wanted bigger spatters, you could take your, where did it go? There it is. You could take a bigger brush like this, load it, and splat it like that. That's going to give you directional spatter. So if you know exactly, you want a spray of irises or something, you could certainly do that. I'll give you an example here. And it's just going to spatter out that way. Okay. So we'll take this off. And as I say, you can paint with gouache. You can add dots with your brush. And create your little little shapes, sort of enhancing where your spatter has already gone. Okay. I love these short, stiff bristled brushes because they really help you when you're trying to shape things in the background. Just want to make that tree shape look a little different. We'll just fluff that out a tiny bit more. So you can see how spatter can give you the effect that you're looking for if you want just a bit of a definition in some areas. keep it from other areas by blocking it off, and have some fun with it. I'd like to thank the Process Art Discovery audience for joining me today. If you like what you've seen and you'd like to learn more, subscribe to the channel.